All right, you guys ready to do the party? So where we left off, we were talking a lot about the input, process, output, and now we're gonna go a little bit more into some of those specifics of those parts, right? So let's just say we focus right now on the control module. Example being ECM, PCM. If this was non-engine performance and it was like electrical, it might be the BCM or et cetera, right? Does anybody know if you need to change one of those modules, what you gotta do? If you look, yeah, so like if you look right here, they don't look very hard to get at, right? Like you can see them, you can disconnect it, you can slide it out. But yes, we're talking more about programming. So now that you guys have understood why the programming is there, we have to have that programming so it knows what to do with the input and how to control the output. All those instructions need to be written. Those are written by programming. So if you change a module because you diagnose it as a bad module, it's not plug and play. You know the term plug and play? You unplug it and you plug it in, you play it. Sometimes back in the old days they were. So if I were to take you way back and you were to pull the module out, get a new module, you'd actually take the module apart and you'd pull this little EEPROM chip or EEPROM chip and you put it in, and that's when people would say, oh, the ECU is chipped. You know, you got a performance chip in there because you used to actually change the EEPROM chip. But that's pretty old school. New stuff is going to be you'd update the actual program. There's no chip to remove off the board. The chip is permanently soldered on the board, but it's erasable and writable. So you would clear the program out and upload a new program. If you get the ECU brand new, there's no program in there. It's blank. So you try to plug it in, it doesn't have any information, it doesn't have any programming, it doesn't know what injector on time to do, what timing of the ignition, it doesn't know any of that. It won't work. So this is a kind of a cool screen. How we do this really varies depending on the manufacturer, but this one looks mostly like a GM tool. So you go ahead and you could hook up, and it's giving you some different options, which tool you're going to use. Are you going to use the MDE, or are you going to use the Tech 2, which is going way back, or etc. And you can actually connect it, and you can maybe vaguely see you actually do a reprogram ECU or a replace and reprogram. So if it's a reprogram, that's going to automatically overwrite the file that's in there. If it's a replace and reprogram, that means there's nothing in there. It's just going to write it. And sometimes it's got to do just a little bit different with, you know, maybe like the anti-security, the anti-theft or the security system, or pass key, pass lock, or immobilizer, right? So sometimes the way that it programs can vary if it's a brand new ECU or if it's a rewriting something that's already been written, right? So kind of interesting. Now, why would we do it? Well, we just said, if you replace the ECM or the ECU as a universal electronic control unit, it's brand new. It doesn't come with a program. You need a program. So if you have an ECU of any sort that fails, how are you going to replace it?
ECU?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's tough, huh? So that's one of the things I don't like when, right? So if somebody calls me, that's one of the things that's really hard for me to fix for them is like, hey, I got a bad, they'll call it a bad computer. And I'll say, okay, well, what do you want to do? It's kind of like, well, can you replace it? Sure, I can unbolt it. I can undo the connectors. I can redo the connectors. I can bolt it back in. But then what are you going to do? Are you going to tow it to the dealership and have the dealership program it? A lot of dealerships won't get involved in that. They'll just say, you know what? Whoever replaced it, let them program it. And I kind of understand where they're coming from. From one perspective, you could say it's the dealership. They're mad because you didn't have them do it. So they're not going to help you because they want, you know, they're upset that you didn't hire them to replace it. And there's probably some truth to that. And that's why people would call it the stealership. The stealership, right? But think about it like this. ECMs are replaced a lot. Any sort of ECU is replaced a lot. Do you think that there's a fair chance that could be a misdiagnosis? Definitely could be, huh? So you go ahead and you replace the part, you tow it into the dealership, The dealership says, oh yeah, we'll program that. They program it and it still doesn't work. Now you got a broken car there. What the dealership really should do is like, well, you diagnosed it. Here you go. Tow it back out of here. Then you got the customers kind of like, well, maybe you didn't program it right. Maybe you should try to program it again. Maybe, yeah, a lot of times if a customer wants one shop to replace the part, but then that shop doesn't have ability to program it, they're willing to take it to another one to have them just do the programming because they don't really want to pay the labor rate. That's not really something I'd want to get involved in if I was the dealer. So like you got a choice. Let us handle the whole problem. And then if they're programming it and it doesn't start, then they're like, uh-oh, this is our problem. We misdiagnosed it. We need to figure it out. It's just cleaner to keep one person involved, right? It's kind of like if it was a bunch of contractors working on your house, building you a house. There you go. The American dream is back. You're all gonna someday build your own house. I don't mean to be like rude or mean, but I'd like to see it come back to that point where you could afford a house in about 3 years worth of your salary, like your parents could. Well, it depends on how old your parents are. If your parents are my age, they could.
But they believe in good.
But if your parents were a little closer to my parents' age, like you could actually do that stuff, right? So let's just say someday you're gonna have a house built. The way I'd recommend it is you hire one general contractor. That general contractor is in charge of the whole job. So if the plumber is trying to run pipe in the wall and then messes up the electrical, you don't call up the plumber and be like, hey, you messed up the electrical. And then they're like, it wasn't me, it was the electrician. And then you call the electrician. The electrician's like, no, have your plumber fix it. I'm not fixing it. And then you're like, well, it was one of you. You two messed something up. It's kind of a mess when you have different separate people doing different separate things. Whereas if it's all under the general contractor, you call the general contractor and you say, whether it was you or your subs, that's all on you. If it's a subcontractor that worked for you, that's your problem. I don't care who fixes it, but as the person paying you, you deal with it. Make sense? That's the preferred method for this type of things. So if you do run into a control module that needs to be programmed, either get to the point where you can do the replacement and the programming, or let somebody else take care of the whole entire thing. It's kind of a tricky thing. Now, I said the dealer can do the programming. That's true. The reason the dealer can do the programming is just this. This is someone at the GM dealership. They can log in. They can put in their username and password because they're an employee of the dealership, so they can log into the GM service information, SI system, and it's been a long time since I've done it, but they'll go into another screen, SPS screen or something, and they can input what it is. It's a 2020 Chevy Silverado with a 5.3 with this, and it'll say, yep, this is the program you need. You'll literally download it onto your computer, and then there'll be a device that can basically translate it so that your ECM can take that file. Cool. You could even buy that device. Sometimes it's called like a pass-through programmer or a J1772 programmer. But the problem is you don't have the file. You need the file. The file came from GM. GM puts it up on a server for GM dealership technicians to log into and access, right? That's their job. You think they're going to let you download that file?
No.
Exactly.
It's on the Pirate Bay.
Pirate Bay? And that's the thing. Well, and there's probably ways to do some sketchy stuff and some whatever. A lot of those, to be honest with you, I'm not real familiar with as a dealer. Yeah. And if I did, I'll tell you, I'll shoot super straight. So if as a as a dealership technician, I program tons of things. It's very easy. I click, and then you just make sure that the battery voltage is good and stand back. One time I had a porter coming through, no offense to porters or anything, but they tend to be minimum wage mentality. They're just goofing off and and they kicked the cable out of the programming tool while it was programming. You know what happens if you were to your phone was doing an update and during the update, something happens, right? What do they call that? Bricked the ECU right then and there. And I was just like this. And I was like, dude, if you ever see a cable run across my bay, go around. He's like, whoa, what, man? It's okay. I'll plug it back in. And I'm like, the damage is done. That ECU is $600. Now I got to walk up to the manager and say, like, hey, this ECM. They're like, what'd you do? And I was like, well, I mean, I was programming it, and then the porter walked through and kicked the cable. And they're like, which one? This one. So this is a delicate thing, but it's not a hard thing. You're clicking next. You're making sure no dummy kicks the cable out, breaks the thing. It's not, and the battery doesn't die, that'll break it too, right? So it's not hard. But if you don't have access to the file, now it's difficult. So if you wanted to be top of the line independent shop, there are subscriptions you can pay for to get the legitimate files. Like Autel was really good about it. Autel's an aftermarket company. They'd be like, hey, pay for this subscription and this programming tool. And per month, you can have access to get any of those programs. But if you only do one ECU a year, you're paying 12 months of subscription for 1 month. So a lot of times people cancel it. Then they came out with a new plan where you could just buy that individual one, but they're kind of pricey though. It might be $100 program for one time. What would you do as a business owner if you had to do that? If you're the business owner and you got to pay $100 for that file so you can upload it, what are you going to just eat that cost, or what are you going to do? Yeah, bill them. And that's fine. That's a legit way, so I want to talk with all of you as people who could do programs. You just got to understand it's not hard. It's really simple, but you're going to have to pay to get the file. And then, a programming interface, which is really not that expensive. And so it's just a cost of doing business. Now, if you're talking about, bootleg stuff, I'm fine with that conversation. For example, not Honda is not what I use. I would typically use HP tuners. I'm just playing around with different stuff than you, but it's very similar. There's aftermarket companies that have found a way to crack the ECM, and you can go in and that tool, like HP tuners, $550. It comes with a little box and a couple cables and a subscription and a software and a subscription. So you plug it in, you log in, you put in a little code they give you, you have a legit thing. You can download the software from the ECM, and now you have it. You didn't have to do a subscription to GM to get the file. You have the file from the old ECM. So that's a clean way to do it. If you pull the file from the old ECM now, you got it. If you put a new ECM in, you can write it onto the new one. Here's the problem though. When you want to pull the file, HP Tuners bills you in credits. If it's 1 credit, that's $50. If it's 2, which is usually the minimum, it's 50 times 2 is $100. Some of the new system, like they had a really hard time cracking the latest and greatest Corvette. I think they're billing you 12 credits, so that's $600 just for their system to be able to get that file, right? So again, it's not rocket science, it's just it costs. The really cool thing with something like HP Tuners though, you can get that file and you can make your own changes. So as a dealership tech, I had no way to adjust timing. I have no way to make the fuel trim, to make the air-fuel ratio a little richer, right? All I can do is I can get the file, I can put the file in. They have no mechanism for me to be able to modify the file. So from a typical repair standpoint, the only reason we're going to do a program is if we change the ECM and we just need to get the original file into the new one. And we're hands off. We're not tuners. At least not during the day. What you'd be doing in the moonlight is up to you. But once in a great while, like I had one that was really, this car kicked my butt. This car made me rethink my whole life. And you can make fun of me because it was a Kia, but it was a Kia Sorento. And it was when they first came out. I think they came out in 2009, 10, right around there. It was a new body style. It was newer. It was better. Everything was great. And I specifically recall, and the Kia dealer I was at was the #1 volume selling dealer in the United States. So we were slammed. We were like really busy. And it was in a janky little kind of ghetto city in upstate New York where I came from called Schenectady. So it's like, if you say Schenectady, that's like, well, it's kind of like saying Hemet. It's fine, but like, you don't exactly brag about it. So Schenectady was cool. booming Kia business. And but we were a tiny little dot on the map. Like it's nothing like some of these bigger, more people have heard of it. Nobody can even pronounce that one actually. If I spelled it, you'd be like, what does that say? But it's fine. So got this car, and the customer's concern was it tickles.
It what?
It tickles. It tickles. So it's kind of like, what do you mean it tickles? And so, well, it turned. It was well, that would do it, but it was a female, and she was not crazy or anything. Seemed totally fine, but you could tell like she was kind of upset. She just bought it and she drove it, and she's saying like it doesn't happen all the time, but once in a while the car just tickles. And I was kind of like, does it feel like is it shaking? It's like not really shaking. It's almost like it's almost like a little vibration. And I was sort of like, I drove it, I didn't feel it. I drove it again, I didn't feel it. But she was patient and I was patient. So she came back, she said, basically what I left her with was, if I can't duplicate this problem, I can't fix this car for you. I want to fix this car. I get paid to fix this car. If I don't fix this car, I don't get paid. You understand? So in the flat rate system, if I drive the car and it's normal, I say it couldn't duplicate. It's normal. It drives just like all the other Sorrentos. Nothing I can do. I flagged 0 hours, and everything I just did was a waste. So it's in my best interest to want to fix this car. But I said, you figure out how to get it to do it. I went on a road test with her and everything. And this isn't something you do as a lube tech. This is something you more do when you get a little closer to like a master tech or like a foreman. So I went for a road test with her. It felt fine. She agreed. I said, do you feel it? No, I don't feel it either. And then she, I think, started to realize I am trying to help her, but if it doesn't do it, I don't even know where to start. I could throw parts on parts into this thing. And then the thing was, she came back a week later and said, I know what you have to do. It won't do it if you drive it here. You have to drive it to, I'm trying to remember. She told me where. It was like Amsterdam or something, like a specific city that was not in Schenectady anymore. And I was kind of like, yeah, I can't do that I'm here to try to fix cars. Like I can't drive this car to the other city to verify this. But what could I do? What do you guys think I could do to try to help her out? Kind of, that was good. But how could I duplicate it? I'll drive it, but not for work. Well, I do like a small one. Like if you drop it off at the dealer, they're going to do a 5 or 10 minute drive. She's saying you got to drive 40 minutes. And I'm kind of saying like, if I drive 40 minutes and then it does it, then I'm going to drive 40 minutes back. Like I can't leave for 2 hours. I can't do it.
Right. Way past that, technically drive 40 minutes, or she can't.
That's true. And then she would probably have to not shut it off. And I would have to be like on standby, but a lot of times on another car. Now you're starting to see some of the challenges of this issue. So what
Better that.
but she started, as we talked, she learned more. When she was just talking with the service advisor, like, just drop it off, we'll fix it. I'm like, what do you want me to do? I already drove this thing all over. Then when she figured it out, I said, you know what? I'll drive the car home. I live 40 minutes away. It could actually be perfect. I don't have to pay for no gas, and I'll drive this car. And so sure enough, I drive down the freeway and I go to get off my exit and I come up to the stoplight and I feel it. It tickles. It does. Like, it's just a little freaking tickle. I don't know. What do you say? Like, it just was like just a little slight vibration, but normally I couldn't feel it. And I was like, all right, I didn't think she was crazy, but like, she's definitely not crazy because I feel it too. But this is the problem. Then I got home and I shut it off and I restarted. It wouldn't do it again until I drove another 40 minutes. And so this one really was like boggling my mind, right? So to be honest, I didn't know what to do. And I'm not ashamed to say that. But when I was in school, my instructors always had to have answers. Oh, well, that's because of this, and that's because of this. And right now I'm like, I have no idea what to do with this car. I don't have any idea what to do with this car. I've got to drive it 40 minutes, and then it'll end up with like this. When I get off the freeway and I stop at the light in drive, it'll just feel a little shaky, like a little something, and then it'll be fine. So like, what do you do? So the process of how you diagnose this is you check for technical service bulletins. There's no technical service bulletin on this. There's no nothing. It's like, well, So much for that one. Technical service bulletins, I'll explain to you, is when someone else figures out an abnormal, hard to diagnose, or a reoccurring common issue. You don't need to diagnose it from scratch because somebody else already did, so you just reference that, right? There's nothing applicable to a vibration, a shaking, a tickle. And I searched all those words. Nothing. So then the next step is I called the technical assistance center and I told them year, make, model, miles, condition, exactly what it does, when it does it, how it does it. And they're like, we have no files related to that at all. And I was kind of like, well, what do you guys think I should do? And they're kind of like, you should, they're not, basically because they're the manufacturer at the technical assistance center, it's kind of nice when they make the call on what part to replace, right? But it's not really nice when I make the call on what part to replace unless I know it's the right part, right? So I could have said, let's replace the throttle body or let's replace the this or the other thing. What they said was, we don't really know because we have no history on any sort of concern like that. We want you to contact another rep. So this is like, sometimes they're known as a field technical specialist or a field engineer or, some sort of a manufacturer rep. So they had me get a hold of this field technical specialist or this field engineer. And I told him about it. He was kind of like, nah, I never really heard anything about that. We've not dealt with that. I'm not exactly sure, but right now I got a bunch of these cars and he's like in 2 states away in New Jersey. And then, he's like, I can probably be there next week. So I go to the service manager. Remember, the service manager is my manager and gets paid more. For the record, service managers around here, you want to know what they get? A service manager director, $250,000, $250,000, $300,000. Okay, so this is somebody who's making some good money. I go to him, he says, I don't know what to do. You're the mechanic. And I'm like, awesome. I'm the guy then, apparently, right? So you got to understand, when you're the tech, your manager doesn't know how to do your job. Your manager knows how to manage your team. It's kind of like a coach. Like if you can't make the tackle or you can't make the catch, you can go to the coach and be like, Coach, can you do it? And they're like, no, I don't have the body for that. You do. You're the player. Now they should be able to lead the team, So the service manager, this one, he was all right. Maybe even less than all right, but we'll just say all right-ish. We'll round up. He's kind of like, well, I'm not really sure, but why don't we do engine mounts? And I was kind of like, if an engine mount is hard, that's what he said. Maybe they made a batch of engine mounts and the mix and the rubber was too hard. And the hardness of the mount would take that engine's vibration and pass it through to the body, and then it would shake. And the whole time, I'm thinking, why doesn't it shake all the time? That only shakes after 40 minutes. But sure, you the bot, you make the big bucks. If you think I should do engine mounts, I'm down with doing engine mounts. But remember, I'm not telling you it's engine mounts. I'm telling you, I don't know, which, to be honest, is a hard thing. So when I was a little less sure of myself, I was a little more insecure. It was like I had to know. Now I'll tell you right now, I don't know. I don't know. I say I don't know every day. And I'm more comfortable with saying it every day. So I told him, like, I don't know what to do with this car, dude. I may be one of the most qualified people in the whole entire dealership, but I don't know what to do. You say engine mounts, we'll do it. Ordered engine mounts, put them in. What do you think? Didn't fix nothing. Now the car's got parts in it, and Kia's kind of not really wanting to pay for those because they're like, it didn't fix it. But then I'm like, hey, I got a technical assistance case number, and they told me they didn't know what to do. And the specialist can be here in a week. And the only reason that the field engineers are field engineers, because they have access to a little bit more information than me, and they're typically the top of the food chain. So like more qualified than me, but not magic, So luckily, the field engineer got there and we're working on it together. And he's like, what have you done? And I said, I checked this, I checked that, I checked this, I checked the other thing, I checked for codes, I checked for TSBs, I checked some stuff, and I also put engine mounts in. And he's like, why the engine mounts? And I was like, that guy, he said to do it, I don't know. And he was kind of like, that's kind of weird. Like, they make engine mounts in batches. You happen to think they don't make like the left, the right, and then the rear. They make like left, 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 right, 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 right. What do you think the likeliness of you getting a hard left one, a hard right one, and a hard rear one was? I'm like, dude, I don't know. It didn't make sense to me, but like he makes more money than me, so he calls the shots. So he said, no, that never made sense. I worked with this field engineer for like the whole day. I learned a lot of cool stuff. He thought it was going to be a slightly lean misfire. So he was a lot older than me, and he said, like when a carbureted car was a little bit lean, they tend to not really have like a misfire, but they just wouldn't run that smooth. You could turn the air fuel adjustment and it would richen it up and it would really settle it down. So his idea was it could be running lean. And I was kind of thinking like, man, that's a really cool theory. The thing is though, I can look at the air fuel ratio sensor and see that it's running 14.7 or 1, it's running 1.0 lambda, but like he had some cool ideas. So I drove for the 40 minutes. I showed it. He felt it. I felt it. We were in agreement. Then he did like a couple little things and he pulled some vacuum lines off and on and things like that. And then all of a sudden, honestly, it seemed like it was fixed. And so he's like, well, I think it's good. And I'm kind of like, I didn't really do anything though. I don't think it's good. He's like, I got to go to Pennsylvania. I got another car to fix. It's like, bye bye. So it was great working with him for the day. Then I drove the car home and it did the same thing. So it was like, now what? Nobody in the shop knows what to do. Technical assistance doesn't know what to do. The field tech rep spent a whole day with me and we chased a bunch of nothing, chased a ghost, and then he bailed, because he has another job, to be quite honest. So it's not really his fault. What do you really do with this car? So at this point, I'm like rethinking my whole life, like not in a dark way, but more just like when I went through school, they told us if you do A, B, and C, you fix the car. And now like nobody knows what to do. And these are people who honestly, I've been in the trenches and I've done the job, but there's people way more qualified than me. If the most qualified person you have access to comes down and they can't figure it out, like now what? There are cars that are bought back. There are cars that are unfixable. In reality, they probably aren't unfixable, but with the resources we have, if we can't fix them, it is what it is. And if the customer says you're an idiot, like just remember, my service manager is $300,000 a year and he came up with engine mounts and didn't fix a thing. So this customer has no ability to tell me anything. Just go sit down. On the waiting room, they have Jerry Springer on. Go in there and you go ahead and watch that and you tell me I'm an idiot. Okay, I'll take it. All right, so I talk again with the factory and I'm insistent at this point. I said the only thing I could tell when I look in the scan tool is when I'm driving it around the dealership, the idle is commanded as low as 650 RPMs. When I'm on the freeway for a long time and it's very warm and everything's entirely warmed up, I noticed it commands the RPM down to 625. And then that's when I feel it. It just feels like the idle's a little too low and it just shakes a little bit. You ever notice if the idle's low, it kind of shakes?
Like it's like it doesn't have is that
Kinda. No, it's fuel injected. And remember, I have no way to go in the scan tool and adjust that RPM, right? So this is if you're following what I'm saying, you're gonna start to see why I think the way I think. Because when I came out of school, I thought one way because that's what they taught me in school. And then when I got this one, it tore everything I knew to the ground. It's like there's a car that can't be fixed. Like, how is this possible?
Right.
Way above the people that I normally have access to can't fix this, right? But that was the one thing I noticed was that the RPM would be commanded at 625 and then it would shake. So I shut it off, right? At this point, I'm on like a mission. I'm taking the scan tool home. I'm working on this thing on my own time just because I'm like rethinking my whole entire life. How does the world work? How can this be? I shut it off. I start it back up, and it instantly the idle's back at 650, and the problem's gone. So I'm totally convinced that when this idles at 650, it's smooth, but when it commands to 625, it's not smooth. Why is it commanding at 625? I don't freaking know. I don't write the program. So do you understand where the problem can be? The problem is in the program. I can't write the program,
Yeah.
but I'm convinced, right? So I talk with the factory again, and I'm like, hey, I got to figure it out. The RPM is dropping to 625, and it's not on accident, right? If it says it should be at 650, but it's only at 625, I'm thinking maybe there's some passage blocked or some carbon. But the computer says desired 625, actual 625. It's doing exactly what it should, which means it's a fault in the program. So I told them, like, this is what it is. And they put me in touch with somebody else, and they said, all right, we're going to do something with you. We're going to have you take the ECM out. You're going to bring it to FedEx or UPS or something, and you're gonna eat. They emailed me like this address, someplace in Irvine, California. I'm like, where the heck is Irvine? Probably a dump, you know. Here I am in Schenectady, New York. You know, probably some trash. I take the ECM out, I package it up, I mail it to Irvine. It shows back up like 2 days later. I plug it in, I drive it home. Perfect. Never happened again. And I was just like,
They never told you what they.
oh, yeah, they did. I asked a few questions.
So the coding thing, did they just have to?
They just rewrote the logic in the ECU, said delete 625, replace with 650. Boom. And it no longer did 625. It was pretty nuts. It was really simple, but it was out of my reach. I couldn't do it. The field engineer couldn't do it. Technical assistants couldn't do it. The foreman, the service manager, the homie, the friend, nobody could do it. Someone just rewrote it. And at the time, I had no idea how, but they did. I put it in, fixed it, drove it a couple times. It was good. Released it to the customer. The customer came back like a couple days later trying to give like cookies. And she was like nearly in tears. Like, I thought this was never going to get fixed. No one can fix this. You know, how did you do it? And I just said, I had to send the computer to the manufacturer, and the manufacturer made some changes. It's like, it was just, it totally tore down everything I thought I knew, that you replace parts to fix stuff. There was no parts you could have thrown every part at this thing. Nothing was going to fix it. Go ahead.
So if it was a coding issue, does that mean that they program and code each of those things individually, or because I know you said
No.
that you can just download the software,
Yeah.
put it on.
Yeah.
So
Mhm.
how could if
How could one
I'm
be
assuming
wrong?
that it was copy and pasted like the rest of the Kia Sorentos that were out at that time?
Yeah, but you know what's crazy? You'll understand now. Remember, I specified this dealer was the #1 volume dealer in the US. That was a detail that was small but important. So we sold such a huge number of them. We were experiencing the first ones that were coming back. So shortly after that, one of my other co-technicians got one, and he's like, hey, what the heck did you do to that thing? And I was like, dude, I sent that ECM out and they fixed it. You can't fix that car. Talk with the service manager. He'll tell you put engine mounts in it. You know, that was the joke, you know, because nobody knew what to do, right? And then one other tech got it. And then sure enough, he called technical assistance, and technical assistance said, oh yeah, look up TSB number ABC, X, Y, and Z. And I was like, what? There's a TSB? I literally researched the TSB, and it says, if the vehicle doesn't do the vibration unless you've driven it 40 minutes, and it does it when you get off the freeway, and it's check the commanded RPM. If it's at 650, this is not applicable, but if the commanded RPM is at 625 and the vibration is experienced only when it's at 625, you're going to go ahead and redo this ECU with this new update.
Literally your exact.
Now I know how TSBs were made. That's why I have no hair. I literally pulled my hair out trying to fix this piece of crap car. And then
You and Mr. Mo's.
me and the mechanic there working on it at nighttime, whatever. So they made a TSB literally using my story, so my technician story. I mean, and that's the thing, it's a cool business. And if I were to have really tried, you know, if it was what I wanted to do, I probably could have made my way to that position and worked at the factory and whatnot. But, you know, partially that's what shaped, like, I realized, you know, there's a lot of things lacking in school and how it was taught, and nobody had that type of firsthand experience, because the saying is those who can do and those who can't teach. And then, you know, sometimes that's true, and there's some good people who are teaching who know some stuff, but then there's a lot of people who try to work in the shop and they don't like to work because it's too hot, and so they're like, oh, well, I'll go work for the school because it's air conditioned, you know. And so I was kind of like dead set on, I wanted to help people get to that point. That one hurt me financially. I mean, I think they paid me like 2 hours for that whole thing. I worked on it for days. Yeah, for days. But I'm really thankful for it, because I learned exactly how that type of stuff is made, right? So kind of the point of that whole lesson is you could chuck a bunch of parts at the car, you could replace everything on the car, and it actually may still not fix it. And so with my mind of wanting to get to the root cause and actually repair it, I go about it a different way and try to really pinpoint the problem. And in this case, it was a program. And then, yes, there was a TSB. And from what I saw, people all over the country were just, it was quick. It was like, hey, what's wrong with this car? It shakes. Let me search tickle. And then they searched tickle. They didn't, it was vibration, really. Or roughness. It was noise, vibration, harshness. and they'd search roughness and it'd say, oh, if it does this, upload with this. And then they click and they click and they click and like, yeah, that was easy. Fixing cars is easy. I just click, click, click. They didn't really understand how that came to be and how many hair I pulled out, and that's why I don't have enough. And so that's kind of what this is saying, like once in a great while, not normally. That was really the only time I experienced that in quite a few years of fixing a bunch of trash. Was that one was like the 1 in a million, but there are situations where the problem is actually in the programming. And again, the only way to fix it is to program it. So you see right here, calibration change. That's what it was. They did a calibration change. Don't give me 625, keep it at 650. By the way, the reason when I asked and they told me what they did, they said, don't talk about this with anyone because you're not supposed to change the idle without getting approval from the EPA. Think about this. If it's idling at 625, the emissions are lower. If you bump it up to 650, the RPMs are higher, the emissions are higher. They didn't have approval to do that. So they did a one-off custom for me to see if it fixed it. I was just the guinea pig. And they said, like, don't talk about this. So when people came and asked me, I was like, do I tell them? Do I not tell them? I just said, I don't. It was, they did something to the ECM. I didn't exactly tell them, like, they bumped the RPM up, but that is what they did. So it was a really cool one. That's kind of the thing. Calibration.
077 sound familiar?
Did you look it up?
I did.
Yeah, see, I don't even know the number, dude. I haven't looked at that in many years. But see, now you know, you could think I'm full of baloney, but if you read that whole TSB later, you'll realize they're pretty much saying exactly what I said. I usually have fact checkers amongst us, but I'm fine with that. All right, so that's the overview. That's somewhat of like why we would calibrate, the reasons we might recalibrate, and etc. And then just kind of saying like later stuff has, will somebody go open up a door for these guys? Please help, please help. You know, these ECMs are getting bigger and more powerful. So you guys know you got like Windows 32-bit or 64. Well, these ECMs used to be so basic. They were 16, 32. I don't even know what they're at right now, but just know the ECMs are more and more powerful, faster, able to process more information. Why do they need to process more information? More sensors, higher speed. They're trying harder to stay tighter to that 14.7. You know, before they'd be close and they might overshoot it and they might undershoot it, right? So in the pursuit of trying to get the lowest emissions, the highest fuel economy, we needed to react faster so we can stay tighter to that perfect number without going off range. So they get more and more powerful. They get more and more expensive. Anybody know why it has these fins on it?
Cooling.
Exactly. They're cooling fins because it's processing more and more info. Old ECMs a lot of times were smooth. Then if you get into some of the standardization, if you go back in the day, every manufacturer would have its own ECM that would run its own operating system, and it would have its own connector, and it would have its own communication protocol, and everything was different. So you'd be like, oh yeah, let me be a mom and pop, all makes, all models, will fix your car. Then when I actually went through my automotive, like when I was in high school, and I said, hey, I want to do auto. I broke my mom's heart because she's like, I thought you were going to be a marine biologist. You're going to do auto like your dad. I was like, yep, that's what I'm doing, Mom. I don't know. There might be some success in this pathway. It's more than just dragging your knuckles around. Like when I started at high school, this is what they had. They'd be like, oh, go get the brick. That was the brick. And they had all these different adapters on adapters on it. There was an adapter for GM, an adapter for Ford, an adapter for Chrysler, an adapter for Nissan and Toyota. And I don't even remember if Hyundai was there yet, but over time, everybody had their own adapter. So if you wanted to work on all makes models, you needed all sorts of adapters and tools, and it was just a pain in the butt. And so that was either before OBD or OBD1. Now let's say, what is OBD? Bingo. So this is a system that has the ability to do some of its own self-diagnostics. Where's the diagnostics? It's on board. It's on the vehicle. The diagnostics does not occur on the tool. So let me shatter some expectations right now. Customer says, well, you have the fancy thing you plug in that diagnoses it. No, there's 10 problems wrong with that statement already. The first problem is this doesn't do anything other than communicate with the ECM and basically repeat what the ECM says. That's it. This doesn't do the diagnosis. The actual system, the onboard diagnostics is in the existing system. It's in the car all the time. The ECM is the thing doing the diagnostics. It's self-checking. It's looking against this. It's checking that. Okay, so all this tool does simply is communicate with the ECM. A simple version of this tool, and we have a whole separate thing on all the different scan tools, right? But I'll give you a basic one because this is introduction to onboard diagnostics. The cheaper tools can do minor things, pull codes. A little bit more advanced can look at live data. A little bit more advanced, they get into bi-directional. That can get information coming in, but it can also tell the ECU to do something. So if you wanted to open and close a valve, you'd need a tool that can send a command to the ECM to open and close the valve to check the valve. So if you want to be able to check outputs, you need one that could do bi-directional controls, right? But this tool itself doesn't do the diagnosis. Really, the onboard system, the ECM does it, and there's a lot of shortcomings to that. The onboard diagnostic systems can tell when something's out of range. Could the onboard diagnostic systems tell that the problem with the Kia Sorento that tickled the customer was that the programming was 625 RPMs rather than 650? No, the onboard diagnostic system has limitations. What it can do is set codes if it's out of range, but that one wasn't even out of range. It doesn't monitor everything. It's a good baseline, but if you think to do diagnosis, all you need to do is be able to check a code and the code tells you what to do, we're way off. That's not even remotely close. And if you think you can spend $300, $3,000, or $30,000 on a tool and that tool will tell you, no, it doesn't have the ability. The real way that cars are fixed and diagnosed, to be honest, is big brains. Yeah, you got to know the system. You got to think about it. You got to troubleshoot it. You got to look at things. And sometimes it's not just testing. You look for service bulletins. Sometimes you talk with people that you know who know stuff. Sometimes you find people, I hate to admit it, on the forum who experienced it, who dumped 3 months into solving it and $3,000 and they found the result. Sometimes you learn from other people. That's how stuff gets fixed. If anyone, by the way, this is a business opportunity. If anyone figures out a way to have AI do all that, you and I should go into business because that's going to be very profitable. But as it is right now, you can throw stuff into AI and AI will give you the most simple, ridiculous explanation, like my car misfires. Oh, it's due to low compression, but it's sort of like, it could be, right? But you could throw this Kia Sorento problem into AI before there was a TSP and it knows nothing. You understand? So someday, if AI can step it up, I'm really interested in investing in that, but I don't see the path. As someone who's had to really grind it out and figure it out the hard way, I see AI as helpful to maybe gather some information for you, like, hey, what's Google's AI called? Gemini. I don't know. Hey, Google AI, what's the torque spec for this wheel? The torque spec for the wheel is 76 foot-pounds. Okay, cool. I'm good. That's good. That's nice. Hey, AI, Google AI, why is this vehicle causing this customer a tickle? It's gonna be like, it's gonna sound like an AOL dial-up. It's not gonna know. So I'm just not that impressed. But you guys should all understand, OBD is just the onboard system doing some self-diagnosis. Cool. And then OBD, thankfully, was replaced by OBD2, right? So there's OBD, which is the original. All manufacturers had their own different things. There was even stuff before OBD where you might jump it to ground and it might flash the check engine light in a sequence like SOS, like a Morse code, and you could get some basic stuff. But that, honestly, I would much rather diagnose a new car than an old car. New car is more complicated, but the tools have come a long way. Old cars with OBD1, like, I've had to do it. I've driven a bunch of old junk, but like, not my favorite. OBD2 standardized. In OBD2, they further lowered the emissions and they included a bunch of things. They did the catalytic converter, but if you look right here, this is a standardized OBD2 connector. They'll call the DLC data link connector. They may call it the OBD2 connector. The DLC is probably going to be the most common. So if you hear the DLC reference, they're just talking about this connector right here. It's standardized. That's where you plug in the scan tool. Again, the scan tool is going to communicate with the ECU, and the ECU is going to give you what information it has. The scan tool itself doesn't really do the diagnosis. It is a tool though. So if we were to link this back to input, process, output, we talked about a vehicle with a problem with the coolant temperature sensor, right? I told you I had a vehicle with the P0128 engine coolant temperature below thermostat regulating temperature. So basically the coolant temperature is too low. How could I quickly see what the coolant temperature is? Go ahead, Mason.
Check,
It's a lot of ways. Give me one way anyway.
check the coolant.
I checked the coolant, yeah, but if I wanted to actually know how many degrees it was reading, you could touch it, burn yourself potentially.
Check the.
Digital thermometer, that's good.
Or
Okay, right here, these two are linking together. I could check the coolant temperature with a thermometer, or ideally a non-contact digital, laser thermometer. But I should compare it to what the sensor's reading. So how could I compare it to what the sensor's reading? Connect a scan tool, look in live data, and I could say engine cool. That's what I did with this customer's car. I looked it up, and it said at the time, technically I'm fibbing a little bit, this was under freeze frame, but at the time the code set, the coolant was like 162 degrees. That's not cold, but it should be higher. It should be like over 185, 187, 190, right? So 165 was too cool. So I just confirmed the coolant wasn't warm enough, and that's why the code set, right? So you can check your temperature sensor by using the scan tool. The scan tool can give you a reading of what the temperature sensor shows right now. Did it diagnose it? Not exactly, but it was a tool to give me a full picture. And when I saw it was only 165, I said, oh, okay. Well, either the coolant's not getting up to temperature or the sensor's reading wrong. These two things you guys said, if I digital thermometer it and it says 180, and then I check the sensor on the scan tool and it says 165, I know that sensor is inaccurate.
It's a sensor issue.
That happens.
you need to replace a sensor.
Possibly. The problem is, remember the nerves, how they transmit the information? If there's resistance in the wires, it makes the temperature reading lower. So if we had a good sensor, but we had a little corrosion in the wire, it might be 185 and it might only read 165 because of the corrosion. So a new sensor wouldn't fix it, but at least know, hey, I got an issue with the sensor, with the electrical, with something. I could measure the sensor, be like, oh, the sensor's good. I could measure the voltage drop of the wire, be like, boom, the wire's bad. Let me find the problem with the wire, right? Or in this case, I looked at the coolant, it was low. And I'm just like, I'm not going to do all these advanced testing. I'm going to keep it simple, stupid. I'm going to say, the coolant's low, let me put coolant in it. Let me pressure test it. Let me find the leak. And guess what? Found the leak, fixed it, clear the code, doesn't come back. I don't even get involved in all the electrical details that we're going to in the next session, right? But kind of sort of making sense how this is a tool. Now, if I thought it was, let's say, a bad injector, I could go in with this tool and I could command the injector to fire, and I could listen to the injector and I could test to see if the injector is working. So this is a tool, but ultimately what's guiding the tool is the technician's knowledge. You'd say like, let me look at the sensor, or let me activate the injector. You don't plug in the tool and the tool just starts doing stuff and spits out what part it doesn't work. Makes sense? So you got to use it as
Yes.
sometimes to get them out. Yeah.
No, just saying. Sometimes
Oh, they can. Yeah, for sure.
little O-rings in there.
Oh, definitely. Yep. Right. And so as we get into the OBD stuff, that's when we start getting these standards. Vehicle emissions control information, that's saying this vehicle has A, B, C, and X, Y, and Z emissions components. It's actually a ULEV, ultra low emissions vehicle 70. That's the standard. That's part of the reason that I'm not able to go in and adjust that RPM. I could be fixing some stuff if I could start rewriting some stuff. I could just overwrite things. I may or may not even have participated in when I put the cam in my truck. You know why I put the cam in my truck? Because when it idles, I want to hear it. Because I just want to. It didn't even really gain that much power, but it idles really good.
Straight to jail.
Straight to jail. No, I totally agree. I put the cam in there and it wouldn't run very well, so I had to overwrite a bunch of things. The problem is the cam makes it kind of lopey and lumpy and sounds pretty delicious. The ECM's like, hey, this has got a misfire. And I'm like, no, it doesn't. It's just the cam. So you know what I do? I go in there and I say, misfire, no longer diagnose misfires. Forget about a misfire. ECM, I don't even want you to look for misfires anymore. That is totally illegal. However, so I just had to have it, right? So I'm just letting you know, I know both sides of it, but would I do it for customer? No. Would I do it on my own? Full-time four-wheel drive V8 that gets 11 miles per gallon just because I can? Yeah. But I don't drive it much, so I'm allowed to do that. And if you really know what you're doing, it'll still pass smog. The truck passes smog because everything's written clean, and then the calibration ID is the same number as the stock one. So I'm just saying, like, if every technician could just simply go in there and do that, they wouldn't really be fixing stuff the right way. They just be like, nah, forget that. Don't even check for misfires. Turn this detection off. Evaporative emission system, delete. You're gone, and upload and program it, right? And then now you got this ULEV 70, and it's like more like not even low emissions. It's like high emissions, 100,000. And so that's why we can't do that stuff. And 99.9% of the time, I won't get involved in it because actually it's something you can get in trouble for. But the reason I know I'm not going to get in trouble for mine is because it's mine. And it's not going to end up in the hands of any government officials, and nobody's going to know about it. And honestly, that truck rolls out of my garage once a month. So I'm going to do what I want to do for the most part. And if anybody came looking for me, I got the stock file, and I'll put it right back in there. Boop. I delete the old file. What file? What you're talking about? And I'll take this video down off the internet. But that's kind of the thing, though, is like you and we're all limited in fixing these cars because we're not allowed to adjust certain things. We're locked out because the government sets these standards, and we have to meet these standards, and you're not allowed to change that. Cool. So as it goes a little bit more, there's various different tests that we could do. So you could use the manufacturer scan tool. The manufacturer scan tool, the one I use is Toyota. Toyota uses TechStream, which is now technically Global TechStream or GTS Plus. That can do everything that the ECM is capable of doing. I can do any test that you want to do that it can possibly do. It could do it. But it can only do it for Toyotas. So if you want to run a shop that does all makes models, you don't want to have to buy the Toyota scan tool, the Honda scan tool, the GM scan tool, the Ford scan tool, the Hyundai Kia, the Nissan scan tool. Each of these scan tools can be thousands of dollars. You can't spend all your money on just scan tools, right? So most of the time what we're doing is we're working with an aftermarket. We're going with an aftermarket that'll do maybe most of the tests, sometimes pretty much all the tests, or sometimes you can't really do a lot of the tests. And that's where this onboard diagnostics can be a little bit challenging, is if you have a tool that can't execute the test to help you diagnose it, what do you really do? You do the best you can, you get close to the diagnosis, but without access to everything, you can't be as accurate as you possibly can. So it's just the fact of the matter. So for the independents and the all makes models, in a way, they have a tougher job than the dealer because they may not have access to all the information. They may not have access to all the tests because you got the manufacturer, and they do have to release some information required by law, but they don't have to release all of it. And the EPA is like, oh, you can release more if you want to. You can release all of that information. They're like, yeah, how much do we have to release? Oh, 10%? Yeah, we'll give you 10. Like, but you can release 90. And they're like, you know what, EPA, you're the same people who set these standards that made it really difficult for us to do this, and then we had to redesign the whole system to try to get the higher fuel economy and the lower emissions, and then the engine was so complicated, we had to raise the price, and we rushed this to production so we could be in compliance, and now all of a sudden the engines aren't as reliable as they used to be? No, we'll give you 10% because that's required by law. We're not gonna give you extra. So you'll notice the manufacturers and the government they're not really on the same side. No, no. And me, I'm kind of special because I am technically employed by the state. And however, most of my life was employed by the private industry. And so I kind of see both sides of it. And I have friends in the Bureau of Automotive Repair and emission stuff. I even have one former student who his job was to go around and look at these calibration IDs to determine what was tuned and what wasn't tuned. And I was kind of like, dude, you're kind of like undermining your own people, but at least you want to understand this on a greater scale so you can understand like, why can't we do this and why can we do that? And how come I don't have all the information? The manufacturer doesn't really want you to have all the information for two reasons. One is if you have all the information, you can fix it. Do you have to go back to the dealer? They want you to go back to the dealer. The dealer sells OEM parts and the manufacturer makes money off OEM parts. So they want you to go to the dealer. If you go to the corner, Mickey Mouse garage, Billy Bob's bait, tackle, and auto repair, perhaps, they're not buying stuff from the dealer. They're buying stuff from probably AutoZone. Yeah, exactly. So the dealer's getting no profit. So the dealer doesn't want you to have the info. However, the dealer makes deals with All Data and ProDemand and these Mitchell type of things, Identifix, and they'll say, you know what, we'll give you more than the minimum information. We'll give it to you, but you got to pay us. So All Data will pay the manufacturer an amount of money in exchange for the information, and then you can get that information by subscribing to the service information and paying per month. I think All Data was like 700 something a year for this, and we get a good deal because we're a school, and that's also why you can't access it at home. If you all want to access it at home, it's much more money. Here we're doing IP-based subscription where students can do it while you're on campus in class, and $700 a year is a pretty good deal, right? So you got to understand when you get into this level, if you don't have access to the information, you're done. If you Google it, I don't know what information that is. That could be Mason in his basement making specs. He could be down there being like, oh yeah, this is the spec. This is the spec for that, just, but maybe he got it legit. I don't know. But the point is, if you go all about this diagnosis and then come to find out you got the wrong information, you could be wasting hours and hours of time. You really need to have exactly. And then you want to get paid and they're like, I'm not going to pay you. You didn't fix it. And then you're like, yeah, but I tested it and I was going off of this spec that I got off of Google. And then be like, Google? Like, you're a professional and you get your information off of Google? So that's kind of the dynamics, right? Now, here's something that's OBD related that's going to be critical. Monitors. Anybody know what monitors could be in this context? OBD2 monitors. Monitors are the tests. Monitors are a pass or fail or a not run. So if anybody's ever got a smog, if you clear all your codes and you go to get a smog, do you know why you fail? Your monitors are cleared or incomplete. Exactly. When there's a problem and you clear the codes, it wipes all the monitors, they're all incomplete. Then you have to drive it a certain way, a certain speed, a certain amount of time to rerun the test. The reason this is so critical is when you get a code, when you get a diagnostic trouble code, it all started with a failed test, right? So if you have, let's say, that P0128 for the thermostat, we'll just say loosely, that low coolant temperature, I could clear that code and now the light's off. And the customer's like, oh, fine, take my money. Is it fixed? I don't know. I could literally just clear the code. Do you know why it doesn't come back right away? Because it has to run the monitor. What's the monitor? It depends. It depends on that specific thing. I can tell you that code sets when it takes a certain amount of time to warm up. And it's gonna say, you should warm up to 185 within 8 minutes if you started at 52 degrees this morning. 8 minutes. What if it takes 9? Is that a pass or a fail? Supposed to do it within 8. What if it takes 9? Fail, set the code. But what did I have to do to have it fail? It had to start at 53 degrees and it had to run for 9 minutes, for eight or 9 minutes, right? For however long it took to get to 185. At 8 minutes, it was only at 165. But if I have the car running already warm and I clear the code and then I shut it off and I give it back to the customer, that light's not going to come back on right away because it's got to cool down and then warm up again. So you know when that code will set again? Probably tomorrow. Right? So people would clear the code and then be like, it's fixed. And then you'd be like, well, they must have fixed it because the light was off, but then it came on the next day and they'd be like, oh yeah, it must have failed again. We're not going to give you a refund. We'll just charge you again. Like that was never honest, so the monitors really are the test. And if it runs the monitor and it fails, you get a code. And if it runs the monitor and it passes, that monitor will be listed as like okay or pass. To get smog, you have to have them all okay or passed. To really know if the car is fixed, honestly, if you fix the problem you think and you clear the code, to be thorough, you should test it enough to see the monitor run and pass. If it ran and failed, as evident by you had a code, and then you fix something and then it ran and passed, you're feeling like really good, like, hey, this is definitely fixed. I know because I let it run the monitor and it passed. That's good. I would write that up in your story. I'd document that. Kind of makes sense. So just so you know, kind of a little bit about a monitor, like sometimes maybe the pre-test, you might have to do clear the code, start the engine, allow it to idle for 1 to 2 minutes. The system voltage should be between 10 and 18. Then as you drive it stop and go traffic at different speeds between 25 and 55 for several minutes. Then check the monitor status. At the end of the drive cycle, review the status of the component monitor on the scan tool. This is just one test. This is just one drive cycle for one monitor. There may be many. If you're trying to get a car smog, they kind of try to combine about 5 to 8 of those in one thing, and they'll tell you drive like this and do that and do this and do this and do that and do that and do that. And that's so that it'll hit 5 to 8 different drive cycles in one drive and you can hopefully pass. But one clue is it's got to be a cold start. So if the car's already warm, you're not going to get it to pass today. You might get it to pass tomorrow. Or you can put it out in the parking lot with the hood open and the water hose on it and try to rapidly cool it. Don't ask me how I know about that. Because I need a cold start. I'm going to get it cold as fast as possible. Because again, that's how these monitors kind of run, right? We could spend tons of time on monitors, but it won't be for today. Yeah, it's probably not the best idea. But it's worked for me several times. I've had no issues, so I'm speaking from experience. I haven't had a problem, but I was told the same thing by my dad. Don't spray that hot engine, you'll crack it. And maybe it happened someday, but it didn't happen to me.
I don't know.
I don't know if that was, I sprayed the water on there and it was still hot. It took like 30 minutes of running the water on there to get the coolant down to like 70, so I could consider it a cold start. I just don't think you can cool it that fast. If you could, maybe you could crack the block, but I think it's kind of like a wives' tale.
Yeah.
I do. And if somebody's got hard evidence, I'd love to see it. But most of the time, it's a story of someone I knew that knew someone that saw someone that talked to someone that happened. Exactly, same thing. Now, if you want to check these monitors, so you do key on, you can go into the monitor screen and you can actually see which ones have passed, which ones have failed. You can see if they're complete, if they're incomplete, etc. So like right here, this is catalyst. That's the catalytic converter monitor. It's from what I saw, I believe not complete. Right? So if you have a car, you're gonna buy a car and you're gonna buy it used, and you go to check it out and you plug the scan tool in and you see that the catalyst monitor is not complete, does anybody have any suspicions? Oh, why is the catalyst converter not complete? Cause if it had a PO 420 for the cat and they clear the code and you don't drive it a lot, the check engine light won't come on until you drive it just right. So does this car have a good or bad cat? We don't know. But that's the problem. You don't know if it's good. And if the cat's bad, you know how much cat can cost, right?
Almost $1,000.
Thousands if it's legit. Thousands. Not like 8,000.
New car.
Yeah.
My car right now is $700 to $800.
If it's older, yeah. But if it's newer, remember, the new cars are held to the higher emission standards, which means they need more of the precious metals. They need to do further reduction. They need to clean it up better. That's part of the reason your cars cost more money too. When they're new, they have the bigger cat, they have the more emissions, they have the bigger system, they have more sensors, they have a faster ECM, they have, and then you're like, well, how the heck is it that I can't buy a car for 11 grand like I used to? Well, they can't make them like that anymore. It's not that the manufacturer wouldn't. If you look at some other countries that they don't have the emission standards, they still make like some cars, some manufacturers are still making cars that they were making like in the 2000s, like in the 90s and 2000s. They still sell them in other areas. The problem is here they won't meet our standards, and also they a lot of times won't meet our crash standards. So it's not just emissions, but the new cars are safer and burn cleaner. So that's the main issue, right? So if you look at those, you can see what's complete and incomplete. You can even look at the chart, and then if it's not ready, it'll tell you what enabling criteria it needs, right? So I can give you this mostly in words rather than a big screen. If you're trying to see if your, let's say it's heated oxygen sensor monitor passed, the heated oxygen sensor only runs when it's a cold start. So if the monitor's incomplete and you're like, why is the monitor incomplete? That means it hasn't run. You might look at the enabling criteria and it may say it has to start with your coolant temperature and your ambient air temperature within 3 degrees of each other. If you read the service manual, skim right over that, you won't even know what the heck they're talking about. But think about what I just said. Your coolant temperature and your ambient air temperature have to be within 3 degrees. Sometimes it'll be intake air. You wanna know what that means? They do.
So like.
But think about this.
Like room temp.
Like the engine has to be totally cooled down. That's what it means. So if outside overnight, if we hit 60, your engine's only cool if the coolant's all the way down at almost 60. Like maybe it's 61, 62, 63, or even 57. If the air temperature is 60, you wait until your coolant temperature is right next to your air temperature. That's a cold engine, right? So in these types of terms, it's going to read abnormally. You're going to be like, oh, it needs a cold start. And you'll be like, oh, yeah, well, that obviously means the engine should be cold. How many degrees? Well, it depends. Anybody ever been to Phoenix?
Yeah.
You know what Phoenix gets down to in the summer overnight?
15.
100. I mean, even if it gets down to 90, is 90 a cold start? 90 doesn't sound like a cold start to me. So that's the thing. When this monitor runs, it can't use a specific temperature because the temperature is different in Phoenix than it is in Bozeman, Montana, right? So it has to be a relative measurement. So you take the ambient air and you say if the ambient air is 60, a cold start would be around 60 degrees coolant within 3 degrees. That's a cold start, right? Then after that, you have to start it. And when it cold starts, the ECM is going to command the heated oxygen sensor heater element to run. And when it does that, it's going to actually watch the electrical flow. It's going to watch current and voltage drop. And if this heater is bad, the current and voltage drop will be inaccurate and it'll fail the monitor. And what will you get? A fail, but if a failed monitor happens, it gives you something. Comes on, it glows in your face. You get that check engine light, and what's behind the check engine light when you hook up the scan tool to diagnose it?
LED.
The LED lights it, but the code. The reason the light's on is because it has a code. Got it. All right, so if you do the enabling criteria, you let it cool down all the way, and it fails, it sets a code.
I know.
Now you're like, okay, the code is heated oxygen sensor number 1, heater circuit, open circuit. And you're like, okay, now I kind of know what to test, right? What diagnosed that the heater circuit was open? What diagnosed, did the technician diagnose it? Did the scan tool diagnose it?
ECU.
ECU diagnosed itself. That's why it's the OBD system. The OBD system runs tests, but it doesn't call them tests, it calls them monitors. And when the monitor fails, it sets a trouble code, a DTC, a diagnostic trouble code. Make sense? So when you got a code set, that means it failed a test, which means it failed a monitor. It doesn't know exactly what, right? So it said something along the lines of heated O2 sensor, open heater circuit. And you're like, oh, it's an open heater circuit. Is it the sensor? Maybe. It could also be the wiring. It could technically also be in the ECM that sends the electricity to the heater to make it work. So what do we sell the customer? Don't know, right? The onboard diagnostic system is amazing, and it can tell us there's a problem in the heater circuit. It can't tell you if it's the ECM itself, if it's the wire harness, or if it's the actual sensor heater that's in the sensor. Make sense? It's done, that it checks out right there. It's like, this is as far as I go. I don't really know what to do after this point. Kind of make sense? That's sort of the limitations of it. Now I was looking, and I think I've burned you guys pretty good. So I think I'm gonna have to call it a tap out right here. How's that sound? It's gonna hurt you, huh?